Hey guys, thanks for checking out this clip of Anatomy of the Church and State. Be sure to catch the full episode on Rumble or ChristiansForLiberty.com. Links are in the show description. Right. Yeah, you don't hear those stories too often either. And it's funny when you mention the people down south that it's not like you could jump on Twitter, right, and see what's going on with the war today, right?
So we were finding out about the war. I mean, if you lived in like an Appalachian log cabin that your parents got in the 1750s, you may have no clue about what's happened to Liberty Bell and all that stuff. I mean, it's very likely you were completely isolated from that news, and you were just getting snippets of it once a year or so from a traveling preacher or a salesman or something who was telling you, "Did you know there's a war going on up north?" Whoa, really? Wow.
What? Yeah, crazy. Now, as the war's being fought, what kind of role did the church play? Were there pastors? I did cover Peter Muhlenberg in one of my episodes, and I know that he kind of recruited his congregation. But were there other pastors that kind of
probably the one I was going to use was his big famous ripping off his robe and "let's go boys" kind of thing. I mean, obviously there were chaplains. Obviously there were people doing that kind of thing and walking alongside. What's kind of incredible to me, though, is not just that there are pastors who jump into the war, but also how many pastors kind of just hold down the fort on their churches. And they just go, you know what, we're going to support you guys. We're preaching for you, but we're also going to take care of our families and people back home. And they keep these churches, afloat, keep the people back home while their sons are off in the war. And off in the war could mean, up the state, basically. And they're just keeping everything running normal back home as well. I think that's kind of courageous because, everything's falling apart. Your people probably got a lot of questions. And if you're not loyal to the king and you're preaching, if that war ends badly, you're probably a goner. And yet you're still going to get up and just go, hey, you know what? We're doing this for Christ crucified. Let's get up here and preach another day. I think that takes, quite an immense amount of courage as well. You're hoping that those guys win because it's going to be really bad for you if you're not, but you're sticking to your guns. Regardless, you're not caging it and stuff. And there's a lot of cool examples of different people who do that and who stick that out. So you have the pastors, the chaplains, and a lot of them are preaching. Some of these states, after they declare independence, they start declaring their own constitutions, like Massachusetts and New Jersey. They kind of put out this constitution of what they're going to do. And at the beginning of all those commencements, you have a preacher come up and give these commencements saying, like, here's our sermon, here's our founding ideas. And so all of this stuff is just integrated deeply. The church is deeply integrated, and people like, John Hancock and John Adams are right there, watching the sermon, inviting the preacher to come speak. So this idea that there was supposed to be any separation, it certainly wasn't known to John Adams and the guys there because they were the ones inviting these preachers to come preach. It was one of John Adams and John Quincy Adams's pastor who they invited to speak at the commencement of the Massachusetts Constitution. Maybe there's another one. So clearly they weren't trying to keep these two ideas separate, but they saw them as deeply interlocked.
Yes. And that's why I think, initially, America doesn't have its flaws, of course, slavery we talked about, but we were clearly much more rooted in biblical principles back then, which might, explain the loss of that in what's happening in America today.